Why nature is the ultimate growth strategist. Before we ever talk about landing clients, closing deals, or even crafting the perfect offer, we need to zoom out, way out, back to biology, because the most reliable system for survival, adaptation, and long-term growth isn't found in the boardroom, it's found in the genome. Nature has been running the world's longest, most efficient A/B test for 3.5 billion years. It's not poetic, it's not mathematical. What survives scales, what doesn't is eliminated. Every tree in a rainforest, every bacterium in your gut, every algorithm on your phone is the current output of millions of iterations driven by one master process: evolution. And when we understand how evolution actually works, we can apply it with discipline and precision to client acquisition. This module walks you through the core evolutionary principle and how they reveal exactly how to build anti-fragile outreach systems. Today's training, the objective of it is to teach you how to design, mutate, and evolve client acquisition systems using the proven laws of biological adaptations, so every campaign doesn't just survive, but scales. Welcome to Scientific Scaling. Let's get into it. The evolutionary chain of acquisition. This is the chain that drives scale both biologically and in business, right? The evolutionary chain of acquisition. You have scale, which depends on reproduction. You have reproduction that depends on fitness. Fitness that depends on availability, adaptability, which depends on traits. Traits that depends on genotypes, and genotypes that depend on variation. Each one is both biological mechanisms and a business principle. Let's break them down one by one. So what does scale actually mean? And what is that? Why is it determined by reproduction? Right. So in the natural world, a species does not expand because of its intelligence, uniqueness, or aesthetic appeal. Evolution doesn't reward novelty. It rewards persistence. A species scales because it can reproduce reliably across time and within the constraints of its environment. Reproduction is the fundamental process that transforms individual success into generational impact. And one lion hunting successfully is impressive, but biologically insignificant. It's the lions whose traits are passed down across offspring, across decades, that defines evolutionary success. In this context, reproduction is not a secondary benefit of survival. It is the core mechanism by which anything in nature sustains, amplifies its presence. Without reproduction, survival is a dead end. Right? In nature, survival alone is not enough for a species to scale. It must reproduce effectively, efficiently, and consistently. So reproduction is the biological process through which organisms generate offspring, thereby passing on genetic information. The more frequent, reliable, and efficient this process is for a specific genotype, the more likely that genotype is to be dominant in population. Reproduction acts as a filter between isolated survival and scalable continuity. Without it, success remains localized, accidental, and ultimately perishable. In client acquisition, from single wins to repeatable systems, this same filter exists in business. A single successful client, a single high-performing ad, or a single campaign that converts, those are the survival events. They prove your system has the capacity to work, but unless you can recreate that successful independently, repeatedly, and across different conditions, you have yet to scale. True scalability is the ability to reproduce outcomes without direct input or constant manual recalibration. It means that the elements which made something work can be embedded, standardized, and deployed repeatedly like a code base that continues running regardless of who writes the next line. So what does reproduction look like in a client acquisition system? That's pretty naughty. Well, a cold email sequence that converts across multiple leads, not just once. A messaging formula that performs on different platforms. An ad structure that delivers leads across campaigns, and an onboarding process that converts trials to paying clients without needing you to be in the room. In other words, reproduction is the systemization of success. It's turning the single result into a repeatable protocol with defined inputs and predictable outputs. Until your business can reproduce its wins at volume, you're not scaling, you're surviving. And this goes the same not just with your acquisition side of things, but your fulfillment and your results, because that's what's most important. You can market, you can sell, but if you can't produce great results, you're not going to win. Reproduction is determined by fitness. So survival isn't enough. In biology, not every living organism passes on its genes. Only those that are fit, those whose traits align with the demand of the specific environment, are able to reproduce consistently. Fitness in evolutionary terms doesn't mean strength or speed in isolation. It means contextual effectiveness, how well a trait enables an organism to survive and reproduce within its unique environment. What fits in one ecosystem could be fatal in another. For instance, a polar bear thrives in the Arctic, but would die in a desert, right? So a peacock feathers are an advantage in courtship, but a liability in predator-heavy terrain. Fitness is always relative to the environment. So be in an environment that suits your level of fitness. So survival isn't enough in biology. Not every living organism passes on its genes. Only those who are fit and those whose traits align with the demands of the specific environment are able to reproduce consistently. So Biological fitness is a measure of reproductive success within a specific environment. It is not an absolute measure of power or desirability, but a contextual one. So fitness, which is the ability of an organism to survive and successfully reproduce given in the condition, the more fit a genotype is to its environment, the more likely it is to be passed on in the future. Same with client acquisition, right? Just because a campaign works somewhere doesn't mean it will work everywhere. A funnel that converts for gym owners may flop for SaaS owners. A cold message that hits in the UK might fall deaf in Germany because they speak different languages. Fitness is not always about how good something is. It's about how well it performs in that market under those conditions. In client acquisition, fitness equates to contextual performance. A campaign is only fit if it converts in a specific environment, defined by your niche, your platform, your audience, levels of awareness, and the cultural expectation, industry tone, timing, and market maturity. If your messaging does not resonate with the audience in front of it, it does not matter how well it worked elsewhere. It's not fit here. That's why copying someone else's funnel blindly rarely works out, because you're importing traits without assessing the fitness to your context. Your acquisition system might be built to sense and respond to its environment, optimizing its components like tone, length, offer, frame, call to action, style, proof to suit the market it's operating in. Fitness is also determined by adaptability. Fitness isn't static. In biology, an organism's ability to survive and reproduce depends on how well it can adapt to changing conditions. A trait that was once beneficial can become a liability overnight, and the environment shifts, climate changes, predators evolve, resources move, and only those who respond quickly and efficiently remain fit. Adaptability is what keeps fitness alive. It's the underlying capacity to detect change and adjust phenotypes, behaviors, or strategies accordingly. Rigid species might survive temporarily, but in the long term, they break. Those that bend evolve. Like this cute bunny. It's basically adaptability is an organism's capacity to adjust to changing environments, right? So the scientific term would be that adaptability is the capacity. Yeah, there you go. So this may happen via phenotypic plasticity, which is the change in expression of traits, or long-term evolutionary mechanisms like gene regulation and mutations. Adaptability allows organisms to maintain or regain fitness in the face of external change. It's not about having the perfect trait. It's about having the mechanisms to change traits as needed. In acquisition, the market is always moving. The business environment is a living system. Platforms evolve, algorithm shifts, consumer awareness increases. What worked yesterday might underperform today, not because it was bad, but because the conditions have changed. So if your acquisition systems cannot adapt, your fitness will fade, and your messaging may start to feel stale, and your funnel may become too obvious. Your audience might grow more sophisticated or more fatigued to what you're telling them to do. The only thing that keeps you fit is your ability to respond dynamically to feedback. And adaptability in client acquisition means updating your tone, shifting your offer, changing your formatting when attention span shifts, testing new distribution channels when saturation hits, rotating angles and proof types based on current objections. Adaptability isn't the same as constantly changing for the sake of it. It's about being attuned to response, signals, clicks, replies, conversions, bounce rates, and adjusting when those signals show decline. Next, adaptability is driven by traits. Now, adaptability isn't random. It's expressed through traits. In biology, traits are the visible and measurable characteristics of an organism, such as their beak, shape, fur color, metabolic speed, mating behaviors, and so forth. These are the expressions of deeper genetic information, and they're what the environment actually interacts with. When the environment shifts, it doesn't judge your genome directly. It judges your traits, and only those traits that support survival and reproduction get reinforced, and the rest gets phased out through natural selection. In essence, traits are how adaptability shows up in the real world, and they are the interface between internal potential and external conditions, right? Just like the jaguar. As I said, a trait or a phenotype, which is the scientific term for it, is the observable expression of a genotype, which is your genes, as influenced by environmental factors. Traits are selected for or against based on how well they help the organism respond to its environment and reproduce successfully. Traits are the functional outputs of adaptability. They're the variables natural selection actually tests. In acquisition, right, in business, your acquisition system's adaptability shows up in your surface level decisions, the traits you deploy in your messaging, marketing, and sales assets, right? So these include the length of your emails, the tone of your messaging, the types of proof you use, the call to actions, whether you're using video, audio, images, or text, or story-based pitches, or straight to the offer approaches. These are traits. They are how your underlying strategy shows up in the market. When the environment changes, when the audience gets bored, when the platform norms evolve, when buyer sophistication increases, it's these traits that either keep you relevant or make you invisible. And if your messages aren't getting opened, if your ads aren't converting, or if your funnels keep flatlining, the first place to look is the traits you're expressing, not necessarily the systems underneath, but the way it's showing up on the surface and interpreted by the audience. Which leads us into this bit. Traits are dictated by genotypes. Now, traits are what we see, but they don't arise randomly. Behind every trait, every beak, every shape, every color, every facial feature and structure, right, is a deeper genetic code. In biology, this code is called the genotype, the underlying instructions set that determines how an organism looks, functions, and behaves. You can't change a giraffe's neck length by giving it yoga. You cannot turn a fox into a fish by changing its haircut. Traits are merely surface expressions, the outcomes of a deeper blueprint. And if you want to change the output, you have to change the input. In short, genotypes drive phenotypes. What's visible is determined by what's encoded. Eyes encoded by the DNA, which is the genotype. So the genotype is the complete set of genetic instructions that governs the development, structure, and behavior of an organism. It interacts with the environment to produce observable traits, which are the phenotypes. And traits are the results of how the genotype is expressed under specific environmental conditions. For instance, your landing page layout, your subject line tone, your script length, your testimonial choice, these are all traits. But behind every trait is a structure, a messaging logic, an offer framework, a thought sequence that determines how that traits come to life. Your messaging structure is your genotype. It's what shapes the traits that the market sees. An example of a genotypic element in client acquisition system. You have the hook, you have the relevance, you have the proof, you have the offer, you have the call to action. Problem, empathy, solution, action, pain, agitation, urgency, guarantee. Each of these frameworks is invisible to your prospect, but it determines everything they experience. If your campaign isn't working, simply changing the traits, like rewriting the subject line, making the video shorter or longer, might have limited effect unless you diagnose the structure underneath. For instance, a subject line that doesn't generate opens might actually reflect a weak hook, which is the genotype, not just the weak copy trait. A call to action that doesn't convert might be a symptom of a misaligned offer sequence, not just a bad button text. So ultimately, we have the genotype, which evolves through variation. Genotypes aren't static. The evolution doesn't work by perfecting a single blueprint, right? It works by introducing variation into the code. Some changes are harmful, most are neutral, but a few are breakthroughs, the kind of small, often random changes that lead to entirely new traits, new adaptations, and eventually new levels of fitness. In biology, this variation happens through mutation, recombination, or sexual reproduction. It's nature's way of running experiments. 3.5 billion years of A/B testing. Without variation, evolution stalls. Without new options, the systems can't adapt. And without adaptation, even the fittest code becomes obsolete. Variation is the introduction of changes in the genetic code, either randomly, as mutations, or through recombination during reproduction. These changes generate diversity within a population, providing raw material for natural selection to act upon. Variation doesn't guarantee improvement, but it creates the possibility of improvement. It is the only way a genotype evolves. The same rule applies to the business system. Your current outreach systems, your emails, your funnel logic, your offer structure is your present genotype, and it's the best guess at what works. But the market shifts, platforms evolve, buyer psychology changes, and if you're not introducing systematic variation, your genotype becomes outdated, even if it once worked perfectly. Variation in client acquisition looks like this. You test new hooks or headlines, you swap out proof types, right? Testimonial compared to data-backed case studies, adjust call to actions, reordering your email and messaging sequences, you try new angles, right? Or you play with length, tone, visual, hierarchy, and so forth. You're not reinventing the system every time, right? You're introducing micro variations to see which trait improves performance, and then you evolve your structure based on what survives. If you're only copying what worked last time or following best practices without variation, you're not evolving, you're fossilizing. And last but not least, let's talk more about the actual DNA behind it, the stimulus genotype. In biology, genotypes are the underlying code, strings of genetic material that determine how traits are expressed. They're not visible, but they govern everything. The shape of the beak, the color of the feather, the speed of a sprint, all begin with a sequence of variables embedded in DNA. The same applies in client acquisition. Stimulus level, right? We've discussed this. Emails, ads, video calls, etc. What we perceive on the surface is shaped by structural recombination underneath. Each stimulus is made up of a unique set of variables arranged in a string that influences performance. In short, stimuli have genotypes, and those genotypes drive outcomes. And a stimulus is not a standalone object. It is a coded combination of microelements that produce a behavioral response. Normal DNA Italian DNA. In genetics, a genotype is a specific sequence of genes that determines an organism's traits. These sequences interact with the environment to express something called a phenotype, which is the observable trait. You have genotypes, which determine the color of your eyes. You have dominant and you have recessive genes, alleles is what they call. And then that produces the phenotype, which is the observable trait that can be seen right now. So stimulus, genotype, in client acquisition is the combination of variables that determine how the asset performs, effectiveness, resonance, and ability to convert. Just as DNA sequences encoded the potential for life, stimulus genotypes encode the potential for conversion. And in client acquisition, structured inputs create predictable outputs. Every outreach message, ad, call, script, video is a stimulus, and each stimulus is built from variables. These are modular components, each one changeable, each one influential. A stimulus performance isn't random, it is the output of the variable string that has created it. If the variables are strong, the output is strong, and if they misfire, the stimulus fails. Not because cold emails don't work, but because that specific variable sequence didn't work or didn't work as well as you want it to. We've discussed the evolutionary chain of acquisition. We discussed variation, genotypes, traits, adaptability, fitness, and reproduction, okay? In great depth, right? Scale is determined by reproduction. Reproduction is determined by fitness. Fitness is determined by adaptability. Adaptability is determined by traits. Traits are determined by genotypes. Genotypes evolve through variation. And finally, we broke down that specific variation through the stimulus genotype, comparing normal DNA to Italian DNA. Next. All right, what do we got next? Understanding the acquisition stack, the 3 M's. So think of your acquisition system in 3 layers. We have the macro, the micro, and the molecule, right? So the full acquisition system, the internal subsystems, and then the molecules, the small components that make up the macro system. High structure, the entire acquisition system, the subsystems that support it, and then the molecule, the actual touch points, emails, DMs, ads, videos, rebuttals, the tangible materials that interact with prospects. It's at the stimulus layer that real world performance is made or lost. Each of these stimuli is coded, and the code is written in the language of variables. Stimulus genotypes, so the input sequences that produce the actual results. In biology, life starts with code, not metaphorical code like actual DNA code, right? DNA isn't alive on its own. It's just a long sequence of these things called nucleotides. But when the right sequence pair up, they form these things called genes, which instruct cells to build amino acids, which are proteins, right? When these amino acids link up to form proteins, like which do everything, like carry oxygen, build muscles, fight viruses, think thoughts, right? Build your brain. These proteins combine into cells, and then these cells become organs. And then these organs, you eventually get this thing called humans that can make decisions and think by themselves. So now zoom back into your business. Your acquisition system works the same way. At the macro level, you're building a human system, a business organism that moves through a marketplace, adapts to its environment, and tries to survive. But that system is only as good as its cellular structure. And at the smallest level, that structure begins with stimuli, the cold emails, videos, scripts, ads, and calls that eventually touch the outside world. And those stimuli, well, they're your proteins. They're the functional units, the things that do the work. They interact with the environment and produce results, but they're not randomly built. They're made from smaller foundational pieces, the variables you choose. So each variable, subject line, hook, tone, call to action, visual, proof, format, is an amino acid, a building block. And some combination form weak proteins. They fold poorly, they don't interact well, they actually get ignored. Whilst others form strong, efficient, reactive proteins, they bind to the right receptors, your audience's psychology, and trigger action. But where do these variables come from? They come from your genotypes, the DNA of your acquisition systems, and every stimulus has a genotype, a specific sequence of structured decisions that determines what variables are used and how they're arranged. This is what the genotype looks like. 1, 2, 3, 4, which produces a stimuli. You have a stimuli, which is your cold email or Loom email, where you send an email with a Loom attached to it, your sales pitch, your Facebook ad, your YouTube videos, your sales rebuttals, your YouTube thumbnails, and these are the genotypic variables involved within the stimulus genotype. For emails, you have the subject line, preview line, body, and call to actions. For Loom, you have the same thing, plus the written copy, Loom script, and delivery format. Sales pitch, framing, content logic, offer positioning. Ads, you have the headline, creative, ad copy, and then the actual targeting itself. YouTube videos, hook, messaging flow, call to action, sales rebuttals, right? So empathy, counterpoint, and tone. The 3 A's. If you guys watch Alex Hormozi's stuff, he did a whole sales training around this. It's great. Would recommend watching it. YouTube thumbnails, image, text overlay, and design style, and so forth. These genotypes don't guarantee success, but they set the conditions for it. The better your variable sequences, the higher your chances of conversion. This is the building block of engineering repeatable success. Not guessing, not copying, but building from structured inputs that produce reliable results. So if we're going to compare the two, where we have the biological layer and then we have the acquisition equivalent. So let's begin right down to the core, the actual DNA/genotype, right, which is the stimulus structure or the variable sequences that you are using to stimulate someone to take action, the micro action chains. Then you have the amino acid, which is the building blocks, right? These are the individual variables like hook, tones, call to actions, creatives, headlines, ad copy, stuff like that. You have the protein, which is the final stimulus. You have the cell, which is the microsystem, so the outreach or the follow-up. Then you have the organism, which is the full acquisition system. Just like in biology, my goodness, function follows structure. If your amino acids are out of order, the protein folds wrong. If your variables are poorly combined, your email flops. Your ads get ignored, your sales scripts hit resistance. But when the sequence is right, when the genotype is engineered with intention and you get functional proteins, you get stimuli that live, that respond, that adapt, that convert. And just like evolution, you don't start perfect. You test genotypes across generations. You observe traits. You measure outcomes and you mutate the DNA. You keep the proteins that work. You discard the ones that don't. You're not just launching campaigns. You're running evolutionary biology at scale, designing, modifying, and reproducing stimuli with surgical precision. So when your ads fall flat or your cold emails miss, it's not because nothing works. It's because that this protein folded wrong. The amino acid sequence is off, or you don't need a new organism. You just need a better string of code. And just on that note, it's really like when people ask me, oh, what's the average, or what do you expect, or how do you know this campaign will perform? I don't. I actually don't know how campaigns will perform. I can only predict based on previous campaigns that are similar. But as discussed earlier, right? This whole people. It's different environments, right? There's different macro, micro, and molecules that are involved within your acquisition chain compared to mine. It's different. I'm just giving you the frameworks, right? I don't know if it will perform well. Full stop. I don't. But I can say that if you put the right inputs in, and if you experiment, and if you build your molecules to build the micro, to build the macro, okay, we might have something here that could work. So client acquisition isn't art versus science, it's biotechnology. You're not guessing, you're sequencing, and if you can engineer your stimulus DNA with intent, precision, and evolutionary discipline, and you don't just get leads. You essentially build a living system that adapts, survives, and scales in any environment. Because just like in nature, the organism doesn't scale unless the protein functions. The protein doesn't function unless the amino acids bond, and none of it works unless the DNA is written right. Because just like in nature, the organism doesn't scale unless the protein functions, and the protein doesn't function unless the amino acids bond, and none of it works unless the DNA is written right. This is the client acquisition shell, right? So acquisition works like a shell. You have the macro, you have the subsystems, and then you have the stimuli, just like the 3 M's, right? You have the macro, micromolecule. Same thing here. Macro, subsystems, the stimuli. If we zoom in, you can see you have the macro level, which is each subsystem to convert people into a closed deal. You have the stimuli level, which is how to get them to bait, how to get them to strike, how to get them to reel in, netting, waiting, and then serving. Low commitment, call to actions, moderate commitment, high commitment, cooking process, which is the pitch prospect, and then the eating process, which is the conquering objections and closing, as well as the variables levels that exist within each system. So there are multiple variables, as you can see, that contribute to building out this macro level, macro client acquisition system that converts humans into clients in your niche. The overarching system is simply made up of a smaller system that are made up of stimuli that are made up of variables. So it all comes down to variables. Stimuli engineering. Why your ads don't work is the wrong question. When someone asks me, my ads don't work, what they're really asking and what they're really saying is, I built the system with the wrong parts. Here's a nice marketing meme. Yeah, because here's the truth. Most marketers miss nothing works or doesn't work in absolute terms. Ads don't win or fail on identity. They win or fail on assembly. A stimulus is just a stack of variables. Switch a few out, rewire the flow, and suddenly that broken ad is pulling leads like a freaking magnet. Same format, same intent, different code. This one's quite funny. This is also quite funny because it's kind of true. Every email, video, call script, or post is a stimulus, a spark to throw you into the market, hoping it lights a fire. But under the hood, it's not magic or mystery. It's structure, modular, editable, swappable structure. Each piece, a subject line, a hook, a call to action, a visual, acts like a strand in a DNA chain. Together, they dictate whether the organism thrives or dies on arrival. But the most dangerous mistake thinking of your stimulus as static, a finished product. It's not, it's alive. Every one of the messages is a living system built from micro decisions. Its job is simple: adapt or die, convert or get ignored, and resonate or be deleted. If the variables are misaligned, even slightly, you get friction, hesitation, silence. Not because of your message was bad, but because it was unfit for the environment it entered. Just like, like if you ran a German ad in the UK, probably won't get the same level of traction as if you were running a German ad in Germany. This is where most people panic. They throw out the whole campaign. But the smart operator doesn't scrap the system, right? They diagnose it. They trace back the variables. They isolate the flaw in the blueprint and rewrite the line of code that slipped. And when it works, that's not luck, that's actual engineering. Virgin complicated media buyer, right? Oh, these are all the things I'm trying to get. They get a 1.79 return on ad spend. The Chad one, just broad, let them rip, no naming scheme, 4.32 return on ad spend. Forgets about active campaigns for months, still profitable. Doesn't even know what it look like. Audiences only tracks the thing that matters, which are conversions. Does no targeting himself. Lets Facebook do it. His creative intimidate inferior creatives out of placement auctions. You can't outsmart Facebook nowadays, guys. Like, you can literally just let it rip and go from there. Traits: why your best performing signals are often the ones you don't see. In genetics, alleles are alternative versions of a gene, one from each parent, that combine to determine a visible trait called a phenotype. There you go. Brown eyes, which are capital B, and then blue eyes, which are lowercase b, which are recessive and dominant. If your genetic makeup, the genotype, is B, capital B, lowercase b, your eyes are brown. But you still carry the blue allele. It's hidden, not gone. That recessive trait might never appear unless it's paired with another lowercase b. Now bring that lens to marketing. Every message, whether a cold email, landing page, VSL, or DM, has traits: tone, length, structure, proof, style, call to action type, and these traits create a vibe, just like a gene creates an appearance. But the mistake most marketers make: they optimize only for what's loud, the dominant trait, and ignore the recessive traits which quietly shape the outcome beneath the surface. Right, so this is maybe if you had a brother or sister who has a different eye color to you, this could be the reason as to why that is the case. The trait behind the trait. So let's say your cold email, feels direct and urgent. That's the dominant trait, the bold, time sensitive. But why does it actually land? Well, because buried within it is its recessive trait, respect, right? The brevity of the message implies I value your time. That unspoken nuance, not the subject line, is what makes someone reply. Or the sales script is high energy, that confidence, dominant. But what makes it resonate might be the subtle pauses and reflective tone. So more of a recessive empathy type that tells the buyer that, hey, this person's actually listening to me. Dominant traits get read, recessive traits build trust, and your phenotypic message is the outcome of both. Adaptation. Here's a funny one. Even worse, traits decay fast because of adaptability. A stimulus with traits conducive to action means that the stimulus is well adapted to the environment. Look at how you have evolved. The perfect cold call script with confident, punchy tone, perfect for gym owners, intimidating for financial advisors. That clean middle landing page, pretty good for B2B SaaS. Pretty boring for Gen Z e-coms. What was edgy 6 months ago now feels desperate. What was bold now feels try hard. And the stimulus that worked perfectly now blends into the feed like a beige wallpaper. That's why adaptability isn't a skill, it's a survival instinct. You cannot lock in a winning formula and expect it to print forever. The market shifts. The audience evolves. And the decay of static traits. The fastest way to kill a winning campaign or message, well, you leave it unchanged. A winning hook reused too long becomes a cliche. A top funnel format reused blindly becomes stale, and a call to action that once triggered urgency starts signaling desperation. The traits that made your stimulus of work yesterday may erode under exposure fatigue and platform evolution. And when that happens, it's not the stimulus that's wrong, it's the lack of adaptation that's fatal. Don't just optimize, adapt, because optimization is refinement and adaptation is survival. The difference? Well, optimization tunes what works and adaptation senses when the word has changed and moves. You're not building perfect campaigns. You're building systems that evolve with pressure, because in acquisition, as in biology, the fittest aren't the strongest. They're the ones that mutate fastest and live to scale another day. Mutations. Last but not least, guys, mutations. Why your next campaign shouldn't be rewritten. It should be resequenced. In nature, mutation is what drives the future. It's not pretty. Don't get me wrong, it's not predictable, but it's necessary, because every feather, pattern, camouflage, system, and opposable thumb on the planet exists because somewhere deep in the genetic code, something changed. And here's the fun part. In biology, mutations are slow, it's random, it's subject to natural selection and time. In marketing, you're not on nature's timeline. You're not waiting millions of years to see what sticks. You play literal God. With better data, with faster cycles, and more precise tools, you're not subject to evolution. You're running your own lab experiment. Let me break down what these biological terms are. So, DNA, mRNA, and amino acids. These are the 3 different types of mutations that are involved within your genes. So to understand how to mutate your messaging, you first must understand how biological mutation works. The DNA. Who knows the definition of a DNA? DNA is the master instruction set. It's made of nucleotides, base pairs, which include A, T, C, and G, which form long chain of genetic information. This is the code that governs everything. What traits show up, how cells behave, and which proteins get built. mRNA, which are the messengers, it's a temporary code of DNA. It carries the code from the nucleus to the cell's protein-making machinery. Think of it like a printout of a recipe. It doesn't bake the cake. It just tells the kitchen what to make. And then last but not least, we have the amino acids, which are the building blocks. Using the mRNA instructions, ribosome translates the code into amino acids, which link together like beads of strings to form proteins. And these proteins do the actual work of life. They move muscles, they fire neurons, right? And they digest food, they fight infections. It's pretty incredible. That's the flow. DNA, mRNA, amino acids, protein, and then life. That's the flow of biology, and it's exactly how messaging works. There are 3 types of messaging mutations that occur within genetics. Firstly, there is the substitution, which is where one base is replaced with another. So as you can see over here, with this one, it was meant to produce this type of amino acids, but instead, because it was a T and an A instead of a C and a G, it produced this form of amino acids, lysine, I think. So you swap one variable for another, a new subject line, a different hook, a different tone, right? Instead of saying, need more clients, you can say, your calendar's been quiet lately. Nothing changed majorly, structurally, but you've altered the resonance point. This can be enough to flip a losing asset into a winning one. Best for if you were doing like rapid iterations or A/B testing. Use this when the framework works, but something isn't landing. Insertion. So an extra base is added into the sequence, potentially shifting the whole output. You add a new variable, an extra proof element, a second call to action, a joke, a metaphor, etc. As an example. For instance, you have a testimonial on CTA. Instead, you have a story which leads into a testimonial which leads into a CTA. Inserting this new component can change the flow, the emotional pacing, or the clarity, either improving engagement or derailing it entirely. This is best when your assets feel too thin or lacks credibility or doesn't even move the needle further, right? So you need to add something in to spice it all up. Deletion. So a base is removed, possibly causing a cascade of changes downstream. You remove a section, kill the intro, shorten the call to action, strip out jargon, or get to the point. Instead of a long lead-in paragraph, straight to offer after headline. Sometimes what hurts you isn't what you said, it's what you didn't cut. Deletion reveals the minimal viable message. This is best for improving clarity, punch, and urgency. Often it makes the asset feel more confident, I can get you clients, or I can really get you clients using this method, and this is how I'm going to do it, and this is what I'm going to say to do it, and here's my guarantees, and just please buy for me. Which one sounds better? I can get you clients. Learn how. Recap. Discuss all these things, the evolutionary chain. There you go. Reproduction, fitness, adaptability, traits, genotypes, variations. Then, what did we discuss? Remember, stimuli genotypes, right? So we have the macro, micro molecules. Same thing applies over here, right? Macro, micro, molecule, and the variables that exist within it. Stimuli engineering, how you become engineers of building your own DNA. A good meme. Then we discussed the difference, sort of genetic engineering and ways in which you can explain how biology can be explained through the lens of client acquisition. How client acquisition can be explained through the lens of biology. There you go. So traits, adaptation, and then mutations. And then finally, the 3 different types of mutations that occur in genetics. So substitutions, insertions, and then deletions. And then last but not least, we obviously talk about why mutation beats reinvention, because here's the thing. Most marketers, when something doesn't work, they scrap the entire thing. But biology wouldn't survive that way, because life evolves by tweaking the code, not rewriting the whole organism, right? The difference between a struggling campaign and a scalable asset is rarely the format, it's the sequence. Mutation isn't random when you control the lab. You can substitute, insert, or delete traits, then observe how each change affects performance. That's not copywriting, that's controlled evolution. Now, how do we play God without guessing? This is pretty cool. Well, let's be honest, most acquisition systems aren't broken, they're just under-evolved. The difference between a campaign that tanks and one that scales, it's hustle. It's not hustle, it's creativity or vibe, it's an iteration. It's who runs the most intelligent experiments the fastest. And if you want to play God with your outreach, if you want to create the stimuli that actually converts, you need to drop the guesswork and pick up the scientific method. This isn't just about testing. This is about building a system that treats every cold email, every ad, every loom as a living, evolving organism and engineering its DNA until it survives and thrives and multiplies. The scientific method of stimulus fitness. Client acquisition isn't guesswork, it's an experimental design. Every message you put into the market is a hypothesis in disguise, and the only way to validate it is to run it through rigorous scientific methodologies. So this is how the pros do it. This is how I did it back in the day. You make an observation, you ask a question, you develop a hypothesis or prediction, and you test the prediction, you analyze the results, you record the data, and then you make a conclusion. Here is a link to the scientific methodology, and I'll go through it in a bit, but I'll just talk about the 4 steps that are involved with it. So step 1, you have the forming of the hypothesis and its null. So what does the null mean? Well, let me get into that. Start with a theory, right? This specific combination of variables, hook, call to action formats will produce a KPI positive result. That is your hypothesis, H1. This is what you want to prove. But to stay objective, you must also define your null hypothesis, the default assumption you'll attempt to disprove. This stimulus has no meaningful effect on KPIs. The null hypothesis keeps you honest. You don't begin by assuming you're right. You assume nothing changes unless the data says otherwise. This alone separates real operators from noise chasers. It's not just, here's a hypothesis. No, in our biological experiments, we always had a hypothesis. But in reality, we weren't testing for that. We were testing for the null. And if the null is incorrect, or if the null is if we're essentially looking to disprove our theory. Does that make sense? Right? This is the default assumption. You're assuming that it has no effect, even if you change it. And if you run the experiment, right? So now that you build your stimulus, you combine those chosen variables, the subject lines, the offer, the framing, etc. This is your test subject, your engineered organism. You send it, run it, post, deliver it, but not for applause. You do it together, proof. Because without exposure to a real environment, your hypothesis is just another pretty theory. Then you observe the outcome. Ooh, does the stimulus has contact with the market? The numbers will speak. Does your open rate spike? Do you get more replies? Does cost per acquisition drop? Does your time to close compress? This is where the specific method flexes. You aren't evaluating how it felt to send. You're observing what actually happened. And here's the tire kicker. If the results don't meaningfully outperform the baseline, you haven't broken the null hypothesis. It doesn't mean the stimulus was bad. It just means the market didn't respond to it in a statistically significant way, which means you're still in the H0 territory and you go again. You refine the hypothesis, you iterate the genotype, right? Remember, you've got new data, which means you can revise your theory. Maybe your tone was off, your call to action was incorrect, maybe your hook misread the audience's awareness level. Whatever it is, now you have more signals, and that signal helps you refine the genotype. So you draft V2, V3, V12. Each new stimulus is another genetic mutation in pursuit of stimulus fitness. Eventually you crack it. You create a version that breaks the null, exceeds KPIs, and holds under volume. That's not guesswork. That's evidence-based evolution. And the point here, right? If you're not using the scientific method, you're not optimizing it. You're freaking winging it. And if you're not building your campaigns to disprove the null hypothesis, you're scaling noise and calling it strategy. This is how real acquisition gets built. Start with H0. This won't work. Use the structured tests to prove that maybe it does. And then you repeat until you have a genotype that survives pressure and scales under load. Stimulus fitness isn't fantasy. It's found in the reps. And the best in the game aren't creative. They're scientifically consistent. Here is your scientific method, broken down into 4 steps. So just as I did, right? You define key variables, define key metrics and KPIs, establish your sample size, establish your latency and time frame, so how long you're testing it for, make the test airtight, only change one variable, create version X genotype, right? The first one, establish the constants, so don't change the environment, right? Run the hypothesis, so run the test, do nothing, log the data. Observe your results, verify the data, make sure it's accurate sample sizes, attributions all correct, delivery is right, and then determine whether or not it's successful. And then if it wasn't successful, or if it was successful, reiterate. Redefine key variables, pick the needle mover, recognize new constraints, pick modification levels, modify needle movers, and then repeat from step 1 with new genotypes. If you follow this, there is no way in hell you will not find, if you do this 12 times and you come to me and you say you still can't get clients, I will literally slap you on your head. Seriously. Because this is your blueprint. This is what you need to do. You just got to do it. Oh, that takes work. Well, welcome to business. I'm so sorry. Sorry. You can, kiss me when you make $1 million, right? So the scientific method for engineering high fitness acquisition assets. First one, hypothesis design. Build the DNA of conversion. This is where science meets systems. Your stimulus, be it a follow-up voicemail, a paid social carousel, or a 15-second Instagram story ad, is an art for art's sake. It's engineered output, and the hypothesis is the launchpad. Stimulus type could be LinkedIn DMs, testimony videos, etc. Primary KPI, baseline control, stimulus version. Map your variables, right? So variable 1, 2, 3, 4. Here are your example stimuli genotypes. So the visual style, the hook, the call to action, and the story ad, right? Then you define the KPI logic. So what are the primary metrics you track and the secondary metrics you track in accordance to what you want the KPIs to look like. Then you determine your sample size, right? Is it 200 views? Is it $200 in ad spend per day over a week? Is it 50 replies? Is it 100 podcast links? Like, what is it? Small data is not real data. Don't overcorrect off outliers. Set the time frame. And whatever it is, double it. So if you want to test it for 5 days, test it for 10. If you want to test it for a week, test it for 2. Because you need a relevant sample size and a relevant long enough time horizon to assess whether or not the experiment went well. Eliminate test pollution. So clean the tests real. Like, are they actually real? Did you create the correct did you get the correct type of data? Was the links traceable and functional? Are replies or views being auto-filtered or throttled? Label your genotype. So what V1, V1, V1. Identify your constants. So the audience segment, the posting schedule, the message length, the profile bio, the audience volume, and so forth. And then step 2, let the environment judge. Ship it. Whether it's House Q2, DM, or TikTok, or B-roll, whatever it is, get it into the world. Don't let overthinking suffocate the actual signals. Let it run it clean. No tweaks, no changing headlines. Resist the urge to optimize. Daily tracking. Track the numbers yesterday within 24 hours in the evening, ideally. That way latency is accounted for. Don't audit performance mid-cycle. Step 3, observe the results. Pattern over panic. Confirm the test's validity. Was it a full sample size? Were they delivered correctly? Did you maintain constants? Reconcile data with behavior, right? So meta ads, dashboards, CRM logs, LinkedIn view stats, whatever you're using, make sure the data is clear. And then, answer the question, right? Did it work? Did the primary metric hit the goal? Yes, great. No, okay. What was the issue? Was the secondary close? Wait for the lagging actions, as in the conversions. Like, do you need to wait a little bit longer for it to show its efficacy? Maybe. I don't know. Then lastly, mutate. Select, evolve, retest. Return to the string, so V1, 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 and pick the needle mover. Maybe it was the hook that didn't connect. Maybe it was the questions. Maybe it was the style. What was it? Fix the strong performance. Freeze all non-mutated components. Delete. Slight mutation, moderate mutation, radical mutation, right? Burn the house for this one. This is get rid of this. Then rebuild it. Hook V2, visual V1, CTA V1, which creates story ad V2. Run, track, compare, evolve. Build your feedback flywheel. After each round, are results moving forward? Are changes traceable? And is there a clear next iteration? Your goal isn't one viral post, it's a stimulus engine capable of producing fitness repeatedly in changing markets. You're not just testing ideas, you're literally programming acquisition DNA. Here's your worksheet. Build your stimuli, right? Hypothesis design, right? Your null hypothesis and your stimuli KPIs, baseline stimulus variation. Define your variables. Define your KPI, your sample size, your test frame, your test integrity checklist, right? Your constants. Make sure it's all constant. Step 2, deploy the test. Step 3, observe the results. Step 4, mutate, and so forth. Then do it 12 times over 12 months until you get the winning formula. And then do that for another 12 months, as in run that same campaign with slight variations to perform, to get the ideal outcome. And then within 2 years, with enough input, you'll be a millionaire or a multimillionaire or a billionaire, whatever you want to be. This is how you do it. This is how I'm doing it. So other people are doing it. There you go. Enjoy. So now that we've discussed that, let's go a little bit more in depth, specifically talking about the mental models for scientific scaling, right? So to build a system that evolves, you need more than tactics. You need lenses. You need the models. Like the models, you need ways in which you can see scientifically, right? I did nearly 10 years of biology, so I understand the biological frameworks of this, and I've done this for a handful of years now. So I've seen it. I'm breathing it. I do it every day. But for some people, this is all fresh, brand new stuff. Or for some people, this is a sharp reminder of what they need to do. So here are great ways that can help you see through essentially the operational microscope. I've been fortunate enough to sit in multi-million dollars, 7-8 figure online companies that run like clockwork, 200, 300 plus employees. We're helping one of our one of our partners, mentors, go from $500,000 to $1 million a month. That's insane. And to see it run so corporate style. So the 6 mental models below are your operational microscopes. Each one isolates a different growth principle from biology and translates it into action for client acquisition. They're not just abstract ideas, they're protocols for how to learn, iterate, and win under pressure. Think of them as the laws of evolutionary marketing. If you understand these, you stop throwing strategies at the wall and you start designing messages that survive, replicate, and scale. These are all your tools for turning every cold email, ad, and DM into a living experiment. Let's dive in. Ceteris paribus. All else is equal, the law of isolation. This is a shorthand indication of the effect of one economic variable on another, provided all other variables remain the same. In any empirical system, especially one that's built for iteration like client acquisition, the ability to learn is predicated on one functional variable controls. Ceteris paribus is the Latin principle of holding all other factors constant when analyzing the effect of a single change. It's what separates science from superstition and strategy from spaghetti on the wall marketing. When you're testing copy, messaging, angles, offers, subject lines, or call to actions, changing more than one element at a time destroys your ability to track and trace cause and effect. You might see a spike in replies or opt-ins, but you never know why. Was it the new hook? Was it the outer structure? Was it the color of the button? The shift in tone? In acquisition, the mats? This matters because you're playing an infinite game. You're not just looking for a one-off win. You're training your system, learning how to win repeatedly, and that's only possible if you isolate inputs. Metaphor. Scientist in the lab, right? So imagine a chemist testing a new formula. She changes the temperature, color, solution, the container, materials, and dosage all at once. The vial bubbles. And was it the temperature? Was it the container? Was it the chemicals? She doesn't know because she didn't follow the golden rule of science. You change only one variable at one time. And in client acquisition, you are the scientists, right? You're messaging your experiments. If you change the subject line, tone, call to action, and structure in one test, you're not learning. You're guessing. And why it matters? Well, Ceteris paribus protects your system from superstition and noise. It gives you the truth. It's the foundation of repeatable success and the precondition for any intelligent iteration. Operational tip, create a testing template. So today we're testing X while keeping Y, Z identical. Document it like a lab book. The ROI isn't just in performance, it's in clarity. And this mental note is the difference between scientists and slot machines. So the scientific method for engineering high fitness acquisition assets. First one, hypothesis design. Build the DNA of conversion. This is where science meets systems. Your stimulus, be it a follow-up voicemail, a paid social carousel, or a 15-second Instagram story ad, is an art for art's sake. It's engineered output, and the hypothesis is the launchpad. Stimulus type could be LinkedIn DMs, testimony videos, etc. Primary KPI, baseline control, stimulus version. Map your variables. Right? So variable 1, 2, 3, 4. Here are your examples, stimuli genotypes. So the visual style, the hook, the call to action, and the story ad, right? Then you define the KPI logic. So what are the primary metrics you track and the secondary metrics you track in accordance to what you want the KPIs to look like. Then you determine your sample size, right? Is it 200 views? Is it $200 in ad spend per day over a week? Is it 50 replies? Is it 100 podcast links? Like, what is it? Small data is not real data. Don't overcorrect off outliers. Set the time frame, and whatever it is, double it. So if you want to test it for 5 days, test it for 10. If you want to test it for a week, test it for 2, because you need a relevant sample size and a relevant long enough time horizon to assess whether or not the experiment went well. Eliminate test pollution. So clean the tests real. Like, are they actually real? Did you create the correct? Did you get the correct type of data? Was the links traceable and functional? Are replies or views being auto-filtered or throttled? Label your genotype. So V1, V1, V1. Identify your constants. So the audience segment, the posting schedule, the message length, the profile bio, the audience volume, and so forth. And then step 2, let the environment judge. Ship it. Whether it's How's Q2, DM, or TikTok, or B-roll, whatever it is, get it into the world. Don't let overthinking suffocate the actual signals. Let it run it clean. No tweaks, no changing headlines. Resist the urge to optimize. Daily tracking. Track the numbers yesterday within 24 hours in the evening, ideally. That way latency is accounted for. Don't audit performance mid-cycle. Step 3, observe the results. Pattern over panic. Confirm the test's validity. Was it a full sample size? Were they delivered correctly? Did you maintain constants? Reconcile data with behavior, right? So meta ads, dashboards, CRM logs, LinkedIn view stats, whatever you're using, make sure the data is clear. And then, answer the question, right? Did it work? Did the primary metric hit the goal? Yes? Great. No? Okay. What was the issue? Was the secondary close? wait for the lagging actions, as in the conversions. Like, do you need to wait a little bit longer for it to show its efficacy? Maybe. I don't know. Then lastly, mutate. Select, evolve, retest. Return to the string, so v1, 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 and pick the needle mover. Maybe it was the hook that didn't connect. Maybe it was the questions. Maybe it was the style. What was it? Fix the strong performance. Freeze all non-mutated components. Delete. Slight mutation, moderate mutation, radical mutation, right? Burn the house for this one. This is, get rid of this. Then rebuild it. Hook v2, visual v1, CTA v1, which creates story add v2. Run, track, compare, evolve. Build your feedback flywheel. After that, after each round, are results moving forward? Are changes traceable? And is there a clear next iteration? Your goal isn't one viral post, it's a stimulus engine capable of producing fitness repeatedly in changing markets. You're not just testing ideas, you're literally programming acquisition DNA. Here's your worksheet. Build your stimuli, right? Hypothesis design, right? Your null hypothesis and your stimuli KPIs, baseline stimulus variation. Define your variables. Define your KPI, your sample size, your test frame, your test integrity checklist, right? Your constants. Make sure it's all constant. Step 2, deploy the test. Step 3, observe the results. Step 4, mutate, and so forth. Then do it 12 times over 12 months until you get the winning formula. And then do that for another 12 months, as in run that same campaign with slight variations to perform, to get the ideal outcome. And then within 2 years, with enough input, you'll be a millionaire or a multimillionaire or a billionaire, whatever you want to be. This is how you do it. This is how I'm doing it. So other people are doing it. There you go. Enjoy. So now that we've discussed that, let's go a little bit more in depth, specifically talking about the mental models for scientific scaling, right? So to build a system that evolves, you need more than tactics. You need lenses. You need the models. Like the models, you need ways in which you can see scientifically, right? I did nearly like 10 years of biology, so I understand the biological frameworks of this, and I've done this for a handful of years now. So I've seen it. I'm breathing it. I do it every day. But for some people, this is all fresh, brand new stuff, or for some people, this is a sharp reminder of what they need to do. So here are great ways that can help you see through essentially the operational microscope. I've been fortunate enough to sit in like multi-million dollars, 7-8 figure online companies that run like clockwork, 200, 300 plus employees. We're helping one of our partners, mentors, go from $500,000 to $1 million a month. That's insane. And to see it run so corporate style. So the 6 mental models below are your operational microscopes. Each one isolates a different growth principle from biology and translates it into action for client acquisition. They're not just abstract ideas, they're protocols for how to learn, iterate, and win under pressure. Think of them as the laws of evolutionary marketing. If you understand these, you stop throwing strategies at the wall and you start designing messages that survive, replicate, and scale. These are all your tools for turning every cold email, ad, and DM into a living experiment. Let's dive in. Ceteris paribus. All else is equal, the law of isolation. This is a shorthand indication of the effect of one economic variable on another, provided all other variables remain the same. In any empirical system, especially one that's built for iteration like client acquisition, the ability to learn is predicated on one functional variable controls. Ceteris paribus is the Latin principle of holding all other factors constant when analyzing the effect of a single change. It's what separates science from superstition and strategy from spaghetti on the wall marketing. When you're testing copy, messaging, angles, offers, subject lines, or call to actions, changing more than one element at a time destroys your ability to track and trace cause and effect. You might see a spike in replies or opt-ins, but you never know why. Was it the new hook? Was it the outer structure? Was it the color of the button? The shift in tone? In acquisition, the mats? This matters because you're playing an infinite game. You're not just looking for a one-off win. You're training your system, learning how to win repeatedly, and that's only possible if you isolate inputs. Metaphor. Scientist in the lab, right? So imagine a chemist testing a new formula. She changes the temperature, color, solution, the container, materials, and dosage all at once. The vial bubbles. And was it the temperature? Was it the container? Was it the chemicals? She doesn't know because she didn't follow the golden rule of science. You change only one variable at one time. And in client acquisition, you are the scientists, right? You're messaging your experiments. If you change the subject line, tone, call to action, and structure in one test, you're not learning. You're guessing. And why it matters? Well, Ceteris paribus protects your system from superstition and noise. It gives you the truth. It's the foundation of repeatable success and the precondition for any intelligent iteration. Operational tip: create a testing template. So today we're testing X while keeping Y, Z identical. Document it like a lab book. The ROI isn't just in performance, it's in clarity. And this mental note is the difference between scientists and slot machines. Next, stimuli splicing. Extract winning traits, so recombine and rebirth. Imagine you're a genetic engineer working in a lab and you've handled a strand of mRNA, which is a raw genetic material fresh from the cell. It's unrefined, messy. Some parts of it, called exons, will eventually become useful proteins, while others, called introns, are junk, excess, noise, distractions. Your job is to splice it, to remove the noise and stitch together only the useful parts into something that works, something translatable into action. That's a biology reference. Anyways, explaining the diagram. So this is what we call mRNA splicing. This is a simplified biological diagram that shows how messenger mRNA is processed before it's translated into a protein. The top piece, called the pre-mRNA, which is unprocessed. This is the red bar, which represents pre-mRNA strand, a raw copy of genetic material. It contains both exons, labeled as the more useful ones, and then introns, which aren't useful. Non-coding segments, they'll be removed. The middle section, which is the actual splicing of it, right? So you can see they're getting rid of the introns, chucking them out, and they're combining the mRNA into the mature mRNA, right? So bottom row, this is the final mRNA is now streamlined, containing only the coding regions, which are the exons. It is ready to be translated into a protein. It's now functional and high value. There you go. DNA, pre-mRNA, mature mRNA, and then protein. This is how you'd get DNA to turn into a protein. Anyways, what this means for acquisition. So what this means, basically, your cold emails, VSL, social DMs, landing pages, they're all pre-mRNA, messy, filled with friction, filler, and sometimes a flash of brilliance. Most of what you've written is an experiment. Not all of it deserves to live. So what do? You splice it out. You analyze your variants, not as a whole piece, but as a modular trait. What intro line drove the highest conversions, the most open rates? What call to action created urgency? What metaphor made people say, that's exactly how I feel? You extract those winning exons and you discard the introns and you recombine the best parts into new sequences, mature messages ready to perform. Splicing in practice, here's what you do. First one, you track by traits, not by messages, right? You don't just track which email worked, you track which elements worked inside of it. You create a stimulus trait vault. So a Notion doc or a Google Sheet, whatever, on all the things that you thought worked well. You recombine like a mad scientist. You use the top performing gene fragments, right? The exons, you combine them together. So curiosity DM, the fear-based email, that metaphor that got replies, stick it into your ad scroll stopper, and then you test the mature stimuli using the scientific methodology that we discussed over here. How cool is this, guys? It all connects. The result is not just a best guess. It's a mature, optimized message evolved from proven lineage, right? Pre-mRNA, the outreach messy, pretty messy outreach, right? The exons, which is the highest performing bits, the introns, which is the filler, the splicing, which is removing the and the fluff, the mature mRNA, a clean modular message ready to scale. That's how you do it. Anti-fragility, not only resistance to pressure, better because of it. The opposite of fragile is not robust, it's anti-fragile. Coined by Nicholas Taleb, this concept describes systems that improve when stressed. This is the holy grail of client acquisition. Ghosted, that's a data point. Objection, that's a psychological map. Failed test, that's a boundary condition learned. Every stressor becomes raw material for adaptation. Rather than seeking perfection and protection, you design for learning under pressure. You want your system to require exposure to resistance to mature. This builds a system that not only survives under market shifts, but feeds on them. This matters most because most acquisition systems are built to win, not to learn. When they fail, they stall. An anti-fragile system metabolizes pain into performance. It's built not just to scale, but to self-educate, right? And to track and label all negative responses, ghosting, objections, unsubscribes, and feed them into a stimuli response loop. Use this loop to spawn micro campaigns that directly target those friction points. Anti-fragility turns rejection into revelation. So, signaling theory, right? We've got three more guys. The message is only part of the message. In evolutionary biology, animals signal things about themselves, strength from fertility, danger, through behaviors or features. Humans do the same. And in business, your marketing is a giant goddamn signal. The font, the format, the length, the tone, the timing, they all signal traits: confidence, competence, desperation, laziness, status. People don't just read your message, they interpret what it implies. For example, right, a 2-line email may signal confidence or laziness. A long-form page may signal thoroughness or overcompensation. The context, not the content, carries hidden weight. Here, are you happy with your current cell provider? Because they're cells. Got it. Two identical messages with different framing can produce wildly different results. Why? Because of what the signal is what they signal about the sender. Signals trigger unconscious reactions faster than content triggers logical ones, right? I had a guy who said like, oh, you're obviously smart because I'm Asian, I look Asian, I wear glasses, I failed to get to med school. Does that mean I'm smart? I don't know. It depends who you compare to. When evaluating messages, what does this unconsciously imply about me? And does this look like someone who gets results, solves problems, or wastes your time? What do you look like? Hopefully the latter. Hopefully you're someone that, likes to solve problems and isn't wasting time. Signaling lets you communicate beyond words. You're not just writing, you're broadcasting reputation. Cellular differentiation from one cell to 100 specializations. Every human starts at a single cell, a stem cell, by the way. I'm not sure if you've heard of stem cell therapy. It's pretty cool. That cell divides, and through a process called cellular differentiation, some become skin, muscles, neurons, or even blood. Same genome, different expression. In acquisition, your V1 message is the stem cell. Over time, as it interacts with a different niche, platform, buyer type, it needs to differentiate. One version might become ultra casual for Gen Zs, founders, whatever, hey, sign up, whatever. Another might be lean into authority or enterprise buyers. Same core offer, adapted to different bodies. Why this matter? Well, mass messaging is equivalent to mass irrelevance. Differentiation gives your system nuances, specificity, and leverage. It's how you go from a generalist offer to a micro-targeted conversion machine. As soon as your message shows sign of traction, fork it by segment. Use CRM or lead data to clone 2 to 3 of your best performers, each adapted for psychographic, industry, and tone. Differentiation increases precision, and precision increases conversion. Last but not least, you have horizontal gene transfer. Borrow success from another species. In microbiology, horizontal gene transfer allows bacteria to share different traits across species, skipping generations of evolution. In acquisition, this means stealing with elegance. Find a killer tactic in B2C, use it for B2B. Discover a viral hook in crypto? Hey, adapted for agency outreach. The beauty is that what's oversaturated in one niche may be revolutionary in another. And this model frees you from vertical thinking. It allows and unlocks cross-disciplinary innovation. It creates the unfair advantage by blending successful systems from incompatible industries. Why this matters? Well, most marketers are trapped in echo chambers. The boldest breakthroughs come from outsiders borrowing what insiders ignore. If you can build a cross-industry swipe file for every winning idea, where else could this be transplanted? Create a list of adjacent niches and test ideas horizontally before others catch on. Horizontal transfers make your systems borderless. It turns evolution into revolution. Conclusion: scientific scaling and the living system of client acquisition. Let's step back. Let's chill.
Daddy, chill.
Step back. What did we learn? We learned evolutionary biology, right? Do you remember these things? Scale, reproduction, fitness, adaptability, traits, genotypes. Gosh, we learned about the whole client acquisition shell, right? Stimuli genotypes, right? The shell. Then we looked about stimuli engineering, which is basically biological engineering. Traits, adaptation, mutation. We learned about the scientific methodology, how to play God without guessing, the steps to do so, the 4 steps that you need to do. We learned about the 6 mental models, the main ones, which is, of course, Ceteris Paribus, cause and effect, Darwin stimuli, the fitness landscape, rate of learning, biological feedback, supporting mechanisms that involved help with the understanding of the scientific scaling, which are common descent stimuli, initial conditions, stimuli splicing, anti-fragility, signaling theory, and cellular differentiation, and last but not least, horizontal gene theory. What you've just walked through is not a copywriting guide. It's not a funnel playbook or a lead gen hack. It's a biological system for designing, evolving, and scaling client acquisition. This is growth reframed as genetics, messaging reframed as modular engineering, and funnels reframed as living, breathing organisms. The core insight? Well, if your client acquisition system isn't built like a biological system, it will eventually break like a mechanical one. Because unlike fixed mechanical systems, biology adapts, it mutates, it iterates, it survives. And in today's market, survival is no longer the bar. Anti-fragility is. You're not marketing. You're fucking evolving. And when you design your message as stimuli, your touch points as proteins, your sequences as genotypes, and your outputs as phenotypes, everything changes. You no longer ask, what should I write? You ask, what traits does the market demand right now? You don't guess which funnel works. You map the fitness landscape and you test the footsteps by footsteps. You stop mourning failed campaigns and you start documenting mutations and iterating winners. And most importantly, you don't build once, you build forever, because your system is designed to evolve. Scientific scaling is equivalent to the DNA-driven acquisition, right? If you want a system that scales, Think of genetic variation through systematic testing and structured mutation. Filter for fitness by measuring performance with rigor, not vanity. Produce for winners by cloning the best genotypes, right, across formats and contexts. Adapt with feedback by closing the loops between signals and iterations, and embed with intelligence by building a library of spliced traits, optimized sequences, and environmental awareness. This is not art versus science. It's biology where it meets behavior design. You're not the writer. You're the bioengineer. You're not launching messages. You're seeding organisms, right? And the next time someone says that the funnel is not working, ask them, have you sequenced the genotype? Have you tackled the mutations? Have you broken down the null hypothesis? Because if not, they're not failing. They're fossilizing. And here's a final thought for you. The most powerful acquisition systems don't resist evolution. They run on it. You build yours to behave like life, experimental, iterate, emergent, and you won't just survive the market. You'll thrive. Thank you for listening to me rant for about an hour and a half. I hope you found it valuable. This is Scientific Scaling from the GoHighLevel University. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.